name's Andrew Bannasch, and I work for the Michigan Department of Transportation as a fleet specialist. So a little bit about my background. I started in 2008 by implementing our fleet management system, trained everyone statewide, and after that I went into reporting a little bit while still maintaining our fleet management system. So I would report directly from the database. Then I worked with a developer to create a universe. We use enterprise tools now. And we're at the point now where most of our reporting is actually ad hoc through that system instead of using the canned reports. So that's why one of the reasons why we are presenting here. We had these reports before a lot of people, but I'm really happy to see that a lot of fleets, most fleets, have implemented a fleet management system, and even, I would say, probably surpassed us with the telematics. That is obviously, in my opinion, the future. It's big data. So that and AI, I think, is really going to kick off some more metrics. But until then, for these national metrics, a little bit of the history. In September 2010, there was a metrics discussion, and I believe I was actually at that discussion. And then after a few meetings, I think most of them were virtual or by phone. Virtual meetings weren't a thing back then. In 2012, the AASHTO Subcommittee on Maintenance adopted Resolution 1203, Equipment Fleet Management Performance Metrics. So in July 2013, the initial submission for posting to the EMTSP website began, and I'm going to show you that website in a second. But before I do that, the committee, the team, came up with there were 4 key metrics, and we added a 5th one in 2017. So I'm going to go through each metric, but they're utilization, preventative maintenance, availability, downtime, and replacement recommended and scheduled versus unscheduled. We thought as a team that if you had to pick 4 metrics at the time and we added a 5th one, that these would be the metrics that we thought fleets could focus on, or at least some of them. So I'm going to go through each one and kind of explain what they are. So utilization, I think we all kind of know what utilization is. You can see that's actually the data from our fleet management system. If you have telematics, you have the best utilization data you could possibly have. The way these metrics work, you can measure them however your fleet measures. So there's not like a standard for utilization. So whatever your fleet standard is for utilization, that's what you would evaluate each vehicle or piece of equipment on. So for example, our utilization for plow trucks is 300 engine hours a year. So if an individual vehicle does not get 300 engine hours in a year, it is not compliant. And if it goes over that or meets it, it is compliant. So you just count them all up and you come up with a percentage. And that's your percentage that's utilized. Preventive maintenance, again, I think we kind of know what this is. In the state of Michigan, we have standards, and we actually do it by individual job. So this one's pretty simple. We have a report that runs, and I'm pretty sure every fleet here tracks preventive maintenance. So for example, on a winter maintenance truck, they'll have an A service, a B service, and a CMV. So 2 of those could be compliant and 1 of them not. So what I do is I run a report, and it just counts up each one of those and comes up with a percentage. So usually in the state of Michigan, we're between 90 and 95% with our preventive maintenance. It's actually our best metric, I would say, the one we have the most control over. And it's a pretty good story. We started at 50%, then in around, 2009, 2010, and we started reporting it, sending it out weekly and monthly, and that got us to about 90 to 95%. As most of you probably know, getting it in front of people usually will improve each metric a little bit. This is also, this and utilization are what we call lead metrics. So there's lead and lagging metrics, and I'll explain that in a second. So availability, downtime. Availability is when a unit is in service and capable of performing its primary function, and downtime is obviously when it's down. This is what's called a lagging indicator. So if you improve your other metrics, it should improve, in theory, your downtime. So if you're really compliant with your preventative maintenance, it should improve your downtime. If you're really compliant with retention, which I'll get to in a second, it should improve your downtime. So really, this is a lagging indicator, and other metrics, other things you do to your fleet are probably going to improve this. And honestly, out of all of them, this one might be the least actionable. I found personally in MDOT, unless you report it down to a very granular level, like at a specific garage, it washes out the data. So if you report it at a state level, which I'm doing for this national metric, since there's 24 hours in a day and we want to be available 24 hours in a day, if a lot of vehicles are going to be up, and it's just going to wash out most of the downtime. So if you're reporting this internally, I would report it to like a more micro level as you can get. Probably a garage supervisor would be what I recommend, unless you have a gargantuan garage. Replacement recommended. This one, we also use the term useful life. It's basically, are you replacing your vehicles when you say you want to? So in the state of Michigan, our winter maintenance trucks have a replacement cycle of 10 years. We're about 50% compliant with that, just due to various reasons that I think we've all discussed at length in here. But a lot of this one is determined by funding. Also, you could improve it by reducing your fleet. But it's pretty straightforward. You just add them up. If it's past your useful life, then it's not recommended. And if it's under, then it is. And we're trying to report a more positive number. So if 80% of your fleet is within your term, then you would put 80% on the form. And this one is actually the easiest to calculate. I almost guarantee that everyone either can or is calculating this. And I have actually done it in a spreadsheet. All you need is a line for each unit, your in-service date, and whatever your term is in months, years, whatever it happens to be. Also, you could probably have, although we don't at MDOT, other factors, engine hours, miles, I've heard. Fuel seems like a really good one. So if you have that data, I'd recommend using it. Scheduled versus...
Sorry, Andy, I was just going to ask a quick question.
Oh.
Yep. Is that okay?
It's okay.
Okay.
We'll allow it. How about that?
Okay. So on the retention, if you have, say, dump trucks or your winter maintenance trucks, if you've got an order out there to replace 100 of them, whatever, do you remove 100 off of the retention before they've been delivered?
No, I would not. I would keep them. So these shortages, especially with some of these manufacturers, are going to make this metric worse.
Yep.
By far. And we're experiencing that in Michigan quite a bit.
So the number is what it is, regardless
Yeah.
of where you're at in the ordering process and
Yep.
whether they've left the fleet yet or not. It's if they're active units still in your fleet, even if you've got them programmed to be replaced, you've got the money, you've got the order out there, they're still beyond retention. You report it that way.
Yep. The only time, see, I'm not personally a fan of removing them if they're on order. I think the only time you would really remove a vehicle would be if you sell it. So if you dispose of it, it's not part of your fleet anymore. Also, I guess if it's a waiting auction, like you're not using it, I guess I would probably count that as well. But besides that, I think just to get a real picture, and you probably are going to want to show your management too, your retentions, your useful life replacement recommended is slipping because you're not getting the vehicles. And you might have a very good reason, like you got 300 on order and you're just not getting them. So scheduled versus unscheduled, this one I really like. I explained to our MDOT personnel, equipment foremen in the field. To me, this one is breakdowns versus preventive maintenance, basically. So in M5, our fleet management system, you could break it down. There's a code on each work order that I can determine if a work order is basically scheduled or unscheduled, breakdown or not. There's also a code on each job, which I don't think I show on there. But on each job, I break it down that way as well, and how we report it out is by individual job. So all it does is it counts them up and comes up with a percentage, and then you can tell your scheduled versus unscheduled. This is a lagging indicator. If you improve, for example, preventative maintenance, you should improve this metric unless your fleet, is getting older, like they're not being replaced. Or if you replace more of your fleet, newer trucks should improve this metric. So those are the metrics. When we set out to make these metrics, we did have to have some sort of standard for what's light, medium, heavy, and the other categories. And we just decided to use the NAFA codes. It's a pretty standardized code. And I will say, you do not have to match every single vehicle up to every 10,000 NAFA code, because I personally do not. You probably have some sort of grouping already in your system that says if it's light fleet, or says if it's a 1 ton, or under 10,000 GVW, or something like that. So light is under 10,000 GVW. Medium, I think, is 10. It's on the website. It's 10 to 19 or 20, whatever that is. Heavy, I think non-self propelled. That's stuff like trailers and off-road and construction loaders and stuff like that. So you would go through and for each one of these metrics, by those categories, that's what's on the form, and that's the percentages we would like you to report. I'm going to get to that form in a second, but before I do that, I want to show just who has been reporting and when, and I'm not trying to throw anyone under the table, but this is an update, so I just want to give an update. So here's the Northeast. You can see for yourself. That's everyone that's reported, and I just highlighted people that have reported since 2023. So Northeast, here's the Midwest. Here's the Southeast. So a lot of people have reported in the past, just, obviously not every year. And we would like you to report preferably every January and July. But if you can only do it once, or you can not do it in that time period, submit it anytime, and EMTSP will post it. And here's the western states. Lots of yellow. So the EMTSP website, I'm actually going to skip these slides. I'm just going to go right to the website because we have internet. So here's the EMTSP website, and if you go to the right, it's right here, National Performance Metrics. It doesn't look like it's a button, but it is a button. If you click on it, it will take you here. And we just open the form. So here's the actual form. As you can see, all those metrics that I just described are in there. You would put the percentage for each one. Some states, they don't have percentages for every category, so if you only fill one category out or just the overall, that's fine, and submit it. And then, if you have a comment like July 2024, that's fine. And then if you are in Adobe and hit the submit button, it should email these people, but if it doesn't, you can just email the form to this email address, these people, and then we'll make sure it gets posted. So that's how you submit it. It's a pretty simple form. There is a DOT, I'm not going to open this, and a benchmarking. So periodically we'll go in and update this just with what's been submitted. So, because right now it's kind of, if you go to each individual state, it's hard to compare. And we're not trying to compare, to get a leg up on someone. It's more like if someone's doing well, and then you have the opportunity to contact them. So that was the intent of that. So if I click that, it'll open a spreadsheet, and every state that's reported with what they've reported and the dates are going to be in there. The definitions I just went over is in this link. The NAFA classification system, all the bajillion codes are in that link, but like I said, you pretty much know and are probably, I would almost guarantee you're probably delineating it in your fleet management system. The list we have out there was posted a while ago. Those vehicles might not have existed at that time, but I bet we could post an updated list because it's pretty comprehensive. Yes.
functional groups, and thank you. I got like 42 functional groups on a summary report we spit out of a super complicated, program we came up with in-house, and it goes like 4 yards, 10 yards, cargo trucks, and I think it'd be important for, to compare plow truck health across the nation, because that could use even the partners and sponsors, give them an idea of, the potential climate for how many trucks need to be replaced nationwide, and you can compare your fleet against, your partners in, your region, right? So
Yep.
I think there's probably a little value in maybe drilling down a little further on that. But I see a lot of value in it. And then one other comment I had, because you talked about when it came time to the replacement metric,
Yeah.
that if you had a new one on the way, that you still reported it as the old one is not meeting. We ran into a little issue with that when reporting internally, because when we tried to budget for the next year, if you've got one on PO and on the way, you can't technically count that one as part of the budget for next year.
Yes.
So we have a separate, we have meets replacement criteria, what that fleet count is, and then replacements are kind of on the way for that. So we take those out automatically once they make it on PO. And it makes it a little more useful for you internally when trying to budget for next year or go to your legislature and ask for money is, okay, these are on PO, they're 2 years out, they're 3 years out, they're at the vendor, whatever they are, but I can't count them when I'm budgeting for next year.
And we sort of do that also internally for the exact reason you said. You can't request the same unit twice, especially if it's, an aerial tower that's 5 years out or something like that. And those things are getting way out there. For this metric, we can discuss it. It's really how we decided to report the metrics is however your state reports it would be fine, but I would say it might be good to show that lag. Like if you're not getting the vehicles, like your fleet is aging, and you're probably incurring costs, and it's going to it's going to make the other metrics worse if your fleet gets older.
And it helps for reporting your backlog, right? If a very powerful number is your total vehicle backlog in your estimated dollars. We've got in our program, it takes and factors in an inflation factor that our Department of Finance audited our system and came up with over a 22-year period, we averaged a 5.1% inflation factor across all vehicles. Now, if we do it again in 5 years, I'm sure that metric's going to go up based upon what we've been experiencing post-COVID. But at least it's something, and it's above the consumer price index. So when we push the button on the total report for any given day, it predicates it upon the date you push the button. So it says if you got 2024 money today, your backlog is 980 billion or whatever million or whatever it is, right? And then you couldn't spend all that, so it's really more than that. So you can choose what date that goes in for what subsegment of fleet, and so that's an important metric when you're on those ones you can't double count, because then you can report your backlog as this, because you've already got the other ones on PO.
Yeah, and I agree with that. That's not a national metric yet, but I would highly recommend reporting it out, because it's this lag. This really doesn't have to do with the metrics, but the lag time that we're experiencing is significant, and it is playing a huge factor in everything, not just metric. It's everything. So I agree, and we could drill down further. I know in MDOT, I could drill down to any level we want. I'm the actual one that writes it and controls it. I think most other fleets probably could too. Right now, I think we have it set up so that we were trying to get other states to report, so we were trying to make it easier, I suppose. And you mentioned zero-emission vehicles, right? So those zero-emission vehicles, in my opinion, it kind of goes by weight. So like a Ford Lightning's light fleet. But we could make separate categories for those. Although
Yeah,
then you probably make separate categories for we're going to have other fuel types in the future as well.
Correct, but I mean, right now, Colorado's beat us on mileage on our electric, pickups so far, but I'm gonna get them. So I look at those and I go, well, okay, you don't have an engine, you don't have a transmission, so is the light fleet metric for replacement criteria valid there?
I think it should be extended unless the battery goes bad.
Exactly. So those are some things that I think internally we're going to have to tackle going forward, and maybe move into our reporting metric.
And I personally, I wrote down a note when you were asking a question, I will be calculating our actual inflation. I never thought about doing that. I know it's going to be higher than regular inflation, and if I just calculate it for the last couple of years, it's going to be above 5%, I know for sure.
Yeah, we did a back of the envelope because we didn't want to drill down to an equipment ID by equipment ID replacement basis because you have to make an assumption. We allow change and mix in our fleet, so if you no longer have a useful, use for a particular piece of equipment and you want to trade in a sedan and get an SUV or an SUV and get a pickup or a trailer and get, something else and, an implement or whatever, you're allowed to. But when we predicate and we look at backlog and stuff, we assume it's like for like, and so that's that. And then you have inflation. What we found out when we looked at all of our purchases over the last 22 years, which is the information we had in AssetWorks, is you actually can look at it and you have different inflation factors. It's a weighted average. So every vehicle type has a different inflation factor. Your pickups are different than your sedans. Your sedans are different than your Class 8s, and your plow trucks and so on and so forth. We found in the plow trucks our inflation was actually a lot higher.
Way higher.
Way higher because of all the emissions rules. You took a spike in 2007. You took a spike in 12. You took a spike, so just heads up.
Yeah, 10 years ago, our plow trucks cost $200,000. Now they cost $300,000. Whatever that percentage is, it's not good for our budget. And honestly, we haven't changed our budget to reflect that yet. The DOT National Metric Contact List, I don't think we reviewed this in the Midwest, but when you guys meet, if you could get a list of contacts, because we would like to keep this up to date. So let's click on it since Excel seems to be pretty fast today. This is just every fleet, a contact, and their fleet management system. So if you had a fleet that was doing well that had the same system, you might want to contact them because it is kind of hard to help someone across different systems. They have different codes, different back ends. 100% of ours is pretty much custom, but I do know all the fields in M5. So that's out there if you want to review it. And then if you go down here, you have each individual state. I'm just going to go to Michigan. And it's a stop. We took a stoplight approach. So we came up with kind of like bands for these stoplights. So you can see here's our preventive maintenance. And if you just scroll down, you got a stoplight for each one. And at the very bottom, you have supporting documents. So I don't think we really usually submit too many supporting documents, but if we do, EMTSP will put them in here for us. So obviously they're putting the forms in there every time. I think going back, I had some presentations in there. But if you submit extra documents, they'll put them in there. So that's the website. Again, if you go to emtsp.org, it is, go back again, right there on the right, front and center. Okay, so I'm just going to skip over a few of these slides. I think that might do it. I did it live. So again, my name's Andy Bannasch. There's my contact info and phone number, but I'm in that spreadsheet that they sent out as well as the attendee list. So if I haven't met you, come and introduce yourself because I'd like to meet you. And thank you very much. Is there any questions?
I have one.
Yeah.
Early on, I think we set those standards for green light, yellow light, red light, like, I don't remember, 90%.
Yeah, and they're on the actual website.
Right. What are your thoughts? Did we hit the mark, or it's hard to know, I know.
So for example, replacement recommended, retention, useful life.
Yeah.
The state of Michigan is at about 50%, and unless we spend $100 million, $150 million, it's not going to get to the 80%. I don't think we should lower it, and I don't think the stoplights are the important part anyway.
Right.
We definitely shouldn't lower it just because we can't hit it. I don't know, I feel like we did a pretty good job. There are some states that are green in metrics we are not, so
Yeah.
Exactly, yep. Yeah,
You're
it's
self-defined,
whatever
you're self-specified, so you're measuring yourself against your standards.
Right. Yeah, we thought it would be a little too hard to make a national standard for everything.
So I had a question. So you guys you were saying in the beginning you guys were like deficient on your PMs, but it looked like you were doing pretty good with PMs now, you mentioned. So how did you correlate the scheduled, unscheduled, due to the poor PM causing the higher unscheduled, and how did you communicate that to the district guys? We understand it. We see, hey, unscheduleds off, PMs are off. As fleet guys, we understand that those two tie together, and your unscheduleds higher because your PM's lacking. How did you communicate that to get them to bring that up within your state and anybody else that had success? How did you guys communicate that to the district guys that don't fully understand what those metrics mean as far as fleet management?
Well, I personally explained it to them. That's the first thing. We send it out, so we send the report out. But honestly, scheduled versus unscheduled, it's a lag indicator. It's important to know. It's important to know what direction you're going in. But what improved it would be preventive maintenance. But also, what made it worse is our useful life or retention. We're not really funding the fleet as we should to meet our retention. So even if we're preventive maintenance compliant, that metric is still not very good because our fleet's pretty old, and it does break down quite a bit. And we just don't have the money to replace. If we were at our retention, it would be drastically improved, I suppose. So I guess we send the reports out. Mostly we send them out and we explain how they work, and then they just get them on ongoing basis. And we have quarterly fleet meetings where those equipment foremen all come into Lansing, our headquarters, and then we actually go over this stuff and a lot more.
I think the equipment guys get it, but I don't know about the highway guys fully understand. Spent their whole time as highway maintenance guys, so like the superintendents and stuff. So I think
Above them, yeah.
Yeah, so that's kind of what I was wondering how you would explain that. You show some of this stuff to fleet guys, they understand it because that's where we've been brought up. It's the guys outside of fleet that you need to support to get there. And I was kind of figuring out like who's had success. How did you successfully get the district superintendents and the maintenance guys to come on board with being successful in those areas?
I mean, we have had success, I would say, but it's been limited success because we have not convinced those people to spend enough. But then I'm also not in their situation. Every dollar we spend on fleet, they're not putting in the road. So it's tough, and they do know that our fleet is getting older. Things are more expensive, and I think we need to do a better job at communicating that inflation rate. I think that was really going to help. And they can see the stuff. They kind of know what scheduled versus unscheduled, because I explained it breakdown versus not breakdown. And I'll explain to them that the other factors will help that, but you can't just magically make that better if you're already compliant with your preventive maintenance. If you're already at 90 to 95%. You got to improve other factors to make that better. So that's really difficult.
So I got one question for you. Is it I'll say the in-service metric?
Useful life.
No, your uptime.
Oh, yep.
Probably not using the right acronym.
Nope, you're good. Availability.
Is it weighted based on what equipment is needed at that time of the year?
No, I wish I could do that. I mean, I kind of could do it, but here's the thing. We use our plow trucks, some of them all year, but I don't know which ones they use. So I'm limited on the data that I have, but if you can do that, I would 100% do that. And if you can, even better, our fleet management system can do this, but we can't input enough information to make it work. If you could figure out when it's actually needed, it's like I guess it usually doesn't break down until you're actually using it, but you want to know if something broke down when you were using it or when you actually need it, and not just discovered. Well, I guess I do know when it's discovered during preventive maintenance, but if you can get down to that level and say, hey, these 3 broke down during this event, and I haven't been able to get there yet, mainly because I haven't had the time. I probably could do it based on the dates. That would be the best way to do it.
And I'll just say, what we do in the wintertime is all the snow and ice equipment, the expectation is 100% uptime.
Exactly.
As close as you can get to it. Now, summertime, they don't need all 1,650 trucks all the time, so we're not gonna put that pressure on the regions to make sure that everything's up. I'm more worried about the mowing equipment and the catch vacs and the excavators, the stuff that they need in the summertime. So, yes, we're gonna get the winter stuff ready during the summer, but the stuff that they need in that season is the priority, and that's what our expectation from a performance metric is.
It's a better way to calculate it. I will say that it's always a snapshot in time. Our availability really decreases when they're working on them in the summer to get ready for the winter.
Right.
They don't need them then, but they are down.
Right.
So it's a tough. The way you just said it would be a better way to measure it, especially for plow trucks. That's a no-brainer.
I don't know if it's better or not, it's just what we do.
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, you could see our availability going down in the summer, but I also know they're working on them. Our work order numbers increase.
Does your equipment management system allow you to do a seasonal mask on some of your equipment that's only used in certain seasons, like your plow trucks that you don't use in the summer or your mowers that you don't use in the winter?
I don't know if it would let me do a mask per se. Yeah, I know I can make a code and enter it. I probably would just, since I'm actually making the report, just say these group of vehicles have this criteria, these group of vehicles have this criteria, kind of getting at what you're saying.
Yeah.
So like a plow truck would be, I don't know, October through whenever I thought, it was going to stop snowing, although that changes depending on where in Michigan you're talking about.
Yeah. Our system has a seasonal mask primarily for our tractors, so that we're not calculating minimum usage against them every month of the year when they're sitting somewhere on the yard waiting for the grass to grow.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons we calculate our usage going back a year. So whenever I run it, it goes back 365, and that's what we use. We also have a 6-month one too, but I don't like it as much for that exact reason. All the tractors are going to be underutilized in the winter. We kind of all know that's true. So, yes, sir.
We use AssetWorks, and we were able to find a field in their portal, in one of the fields we weren't using, and any of the seasonal equipment or snow equipment, we put an SE
Yeah.
in there, and then when running the report, it populates a column that says SE, so you can automatically filter on that and kind of use that to cheat and do your utilization that way.
And if you have AssetWorks, M5, I assume.
No, I have AssetWorks. M5 and them are kind of like cousins, sisters,
Oh, okay.
something. Yeah,
I was going to say there's other codes too, but yeah,
yeah.
it's probably different, kind of a different system. Yeah, I think I probably will do that now that you made that recommendation. If I get some time with our utilization, the issue we personally have with our utilization is we don't have telematics, and it's dependent on people entering meters, and I can't police all the meters. So we end up with utilization that we just need people to review it a lot to get it to fix the errors. So if you have telematics, that's why I want it actually, to get that good data.
Any other questions, Randy? I have one.
Yeah.
The use of your performance metrics for the state of Michigan, has that enhanced your ability for Michigan Fleet to explain themselves and your story to Michigan executive management?
Yes, and we've got more money because of it. They've made adjustments. So they used to, I've been told the fleet budget's an accordion, so it expands and contracts. But they stopped doing that. They made some adjustments because of these metrics we were reporting up, especially useful life and retention. When they see that half our plow trucks are beyond what we want them to be, I mean, that's a really powerful one. So they started making line items in the budget for like audit adjustments from counties and stuff like that. Stuff that they would usually take fleet money from, but then they finally realized that we can't continually degrade at that
So
level.
you were able to illustrate that you have stewardship.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Good, good. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you, Andy.
Thanks.
All right.